You know, most people think driving is just about getting from point A to point B without incident. But here's a bold truth. The moment you slide behind the wheel, the system is quietly watching, and sometimes it doesn't play fair. Not because officers are malicious, but because the rules themselves are constantly evolving. And the way those rules are written, interpreted, and enforced can cost you far more than a ticket. You might think a traffic stop is simple, that a casual nod and a yes officer will keep you out of trouble. But the reality is far more complex. By the end of this, I want you to carry one phrase with you. I understand my rights, and I will assert them carefully. Say it slowly to yourself. Let it settle, because this is the anchor that will keep you grounded when the pressure hits. Let's start with something that will shock most viewers. In 2026, there are at least 10 new traffic rules that could easily cost you $1,000 or more if you're not careful. And yes, number 3 on this list is the one most drivers are completely blindsided by. But before we dive into the specifics, I need you to understand the environment these rules live in. Picture a quiet night on a suburban street. You're cruising, the music is low, and then you see the flashing lights in your rearview mirror. In that moment, your heart rate spikes, your thoughts scatter, and every instinct screams compliance. The officer steps out, and suddenly, the law feels like a living thing. Not words on a page, but a force that shapes your every movement. Here's where this gets complicated. These new rules aren't just about following traffic signs. They're about control, perception, and timing. Let me paint you a scenario. Imagine you're in a lane marked for right turns only, but you hesitate a second too long, scanning the intersection for oncoming traffic. That hesitation? In some municipalities this year, it can technically be interpreted as failure to yield, with a fine approaching $100. Multiply that across subtle misjudgments during a commute. Add in ambiguous language about pedestrian awareness zones and emergency lane encroachments, and suddenly a simple drive becomes a minefield. You might ask yourself, am I being paranoid? No, I've seen it happen, repeatedly. A driver stops for a stop sign, perfectly legal, yet the officer claims their foot lingered over the line, enough to justify a warning that turns into a ticket if challenged incorrectly. Now, let me be honest with you. This is where most people misunderstand the law. They believe traffic stops are straightforward, that legality is clear, and that officers are just doing their job. But the system relies on a subtle ambiguity, and here's the trap. Officers are trained to observe, interpret, and influence behavior in seconds. They are reading your body language, your tone, your hesitation, and even your eye movements. They know fear and adrenaline will make you second-guess yourself. You've seen it in countless videos. A hand on the wheel grips tighter, a foot taps nervously, eyes darting. That's the psychological pressure point. And the legal foundation beneath it? It's all in the fine print of statutes that use words like may, reasonable, and carefully. Those are subjective terms, giving them room to maneuver, and giving you the potential to lose hundreds of dollars if you don't know how to respond. Number 1 on this list of new 2026 rules is deceptively simple: stopping distances in certain urban zones. The fine print says you must allow an extra 2 seconds of reaction time in areas with pedestrian traffic. Seems minor, right? Until you realize that if an officer deems your spacing insufficient, it can be ticketed as reckless driving. Here's the hard truth. Asserting your right to disagree with that interpretation isn't just a matter of words. You may have to calmly explain your decision, maintain posture, and avoid sudden movements, all while your adrenaline spikes. The phrase I want you to remember, I understand my rights and I will assert them carefully, is crucial here, because it signals awareness without confrontation. The second rule involves electronic devices, but not the ones you're thinking about. Hands-free calls are permitted. But in 2026, even subtle gestures, adjusting a navigation system, glancing at a mounted tablet, can technically fall under manual device use if interpreted liberally. Imagine the conversation. Officer, I was just glancing at the map. Yes, but did you maintain complete control of the vehicle? Suddenly, a minor glance becomes a fine that climbs past $200. The nuance here is critical. The law is designed to be precise, but enforcement is human, and humans see gray where statutes see black and white. This is the gray area that trips up even experienced drivers. Now brace yourself for number 3, the one that shocks most drivers: adaptive lane positioning. The law now requires you to maintain a safe lateral distance from cyclists, scooters, and even parked cars in certain urban corridors. The definition of safe isn't fixed, It's based on officer judgment. And guess what? That judgment can shift depending on traffic density, time of day, or even the officer's mood. I've seen cases where a driver swerved slightly to avoid a cyclist, yet was cited because the officer claimed it caused a potential hazard. This is where the phrase becomes a shield. When you calmly state, "I understand my rights, and I will assert them carefully," you signal knowledge without escalating the interaction. Rehearse it. Not because it guarantees immunity, but because it centers your mind in that spike of adrenaline, allowing you to act deliberately rather than react instinctively. The fourth new rule involves nighttime visibility. Reflective gear is now required for passengers in certain neighborhoods and school zones. Here's the trick most drivers miss. The law doesn't always define reflective clearly, and officers can interpret non-compliance generously. A passenger wearing dark clothing can be enough to justify a stop. In court, you might argue it's ambiguous, but on the street, that ambiguity is leverage for the officer. This is why understanding body language and tone is critical. Stand or sit naturally, avoid fidgeting, and maintain calm eye contact. Your composure is part of the legal strategy. Number 5 is a trap for the cautious driver: signal timing. If you signal too early or too late when turning in certain municipalities, it can technically be considered improper signaling, which carries fines upward of $150. Let me walk you through why this is psychological. Officers know most people over-explain when nervous. You start giving justifications, and in doing so, you inadvertently concede liability. This is the exact moment to repeat your phrase silently. It's like a mental anchor, pulling you back from the edge of verbal missteps. Number 6 deals with new pedestrian crossing laws. Crosswalks now extend beyond the painted lines in some districts, meaning even if you technically stop within the lines, you could be cited for failure to yield to a pedestrian's full crossing path. I've seen it happen where an elderly pedestrian steps slightly off the curb and a driver receives a citation for nearly $250, despite exercising extreme caution. This is where the hard truth hits. Asserting your rights is inconvenient. You may spend extra time at a stop, you may face questioning, and yes, it may feel uncomfortable. But here's the reality. Inconvenience is the cost of compliance with principle, not panic. 7 involves construction zones. Temporary speed limits are often misposted or ambiguously marked. Officers can exploit this ambiguity, interpreting your speed as reckless even when it falls within a reasonable range. This is exactly why knowing the law isn't enough. You must anticipate human interpretation. That's the hidden skill most drivers overlook. Number 8, you might not expect emergency vehicle proximity. Even if you pull over correctly, maintaining a precise distance from ambulances, fire trucks, or police vehicles in motion has new standards. Officers have discretion, and the margin for error is narrow. The system leverages your fear of causing delay or obstruction. When the lights are flashing and sirens wail, your heart races. This is biology, not weakness, not. Understanding it allows you to act deliberately. The phrase anchors your decisions, reminding your mind that assertiveness is safe when tempered with care. 9 relates to insurance and registration display. In 2026, digital proof of insurance is permitted, but only under certain conditions. If the device is obscured or the app fails to load immediately, that minor delay can be treated as non-compliance. I've watched clients nearly double their fines simply because their phone unlocked slowly. The lesson is that technology introduces uncertainty, and uncertainty invites enforcement. Finally, number 10, lane sharing in urban areas with scooters and micromobility devices. This is subtle, but impactful. New rules define proximity margins that most drivers never considered. A minor adjustment in lane positioning can be cited as improper lane usage, fines easily exceeding $100. It sounds trivial, but these minor fines add up, and in aggregate, they're designed to push behavior, enforce awareness, and yes, generate revenue. Here's the reality. Officers are trained to read compliance, hesitation, and fear. They understand that most people will respond instinctively rather than deliberately under stress. Your pulse spikes, your mind races, and your voice may tremble. That's normal. But the phrase I've given you, repeated in your mind, is a tool to regulate that adrenaline. It's not confrontation, it's mindfulness under pressure. I understand my rights, and I will assert them carefully. Rehearse it. Let it become automatic, because when seconds count and fear whispers, it's your anchor. Let's look at a real case. A client of mine was pulled over for what appeared to be a minor lane deviation. The officer cited him under the new adaptive lane positioning rule. Heart racing, he knew asserting his rights might escalate the situation. He took a deep breath, kept his hands visible, and calmly stated that he understood his rights and would assert them carefully, refraining from long explanations. That brief act of control prevented escalation, and ultimately, in court, the ticket was dismissed because the officer's interpretation was not objectively reasonable. This is not luck. It's deliberate, informed, and disciplined application of knowledge under pressure. Now, let me be clear about the hard truth. Asserting rights may cause inconvenience. You may face prolonged questioning, the need to slow your pace, or temporary frustration. But consider this. The alternative is paying fines, accruing points, and surrendering control. Understanding the law, anticipating psychological tactics, and regulating your behavior is not optional if you want to navigate these new 2026 rules safely. Body language, eye contact, posture, and verbal restraint are not just etiquette, they are law in motion. Officers read everything. The slightest flinch, glance, or hesitation is noted. The adrenaline and fear you feel are powerful biological responses, but they can be channeled rather than suppressed. That is why the phrase matters. It transforms reaction into deliberate action. If an officer ignores your statement or insists on immediate compliance, remain calm. Repeating your phrase silently allows your mind to stay grounded. You don't argue unnecessarily. You document. You comply physically where required, but mentally, you remain aware. This dual awareness is subtle but powerful. It reduces mistakes and positions you for legal defense if needed. The final point, rehearsal is critical. Say it aloud in your car, imagine a stop, picture the lights flashing in your rearview mirror, and repeat, "I understand my rights, and I will assert them carefully." Let it become a reflex. Let it anchor your attention when fear tries to hijack your judgment. This is the practice that separates panicked drivers from those who navigate the system with awareness and control. Driving in 2026 is no longer about mere caution. It's about preparation, psychological awareness, and strategic assertion. The rules have changed, the system is sharper, and the penalties are higher. But you can navigate it. You can survive the stops, the scrutiny, and the subtle pressures. One phrase, repeated, internalized, becomes your shield. Not because it defeats the law, but because it lets you meet it with intelligence, calm, and authority. Remember, the system works whether you know it or not. By knowing it, by anchoring yourself in that single phrase, you shift from being a passive participant to an informed actor. You reduce fear, you manage adrenaline, and you control the narrative of your own compliance. Repeat it, internalize it, and let it guide you. I understand my rights, and I will assert them carefully. Because at the end of the day, that phrase isn't just words.